Today in Crazed Performance Repair, we are going to go ahead and show you guys something that I've had a lot of requests for, and that's how to get the intake off of here. Now, most of my videos I have sped through it so fast and gone through so quickly, or just skipped over it altogether, that you really don't have an idea of how I go about pulling this, the procedure I actually take. So we're going to cover that. Now you can see I already have a couple things going on here. I have the cover off, I have my impact gun here, I have a spark plug wire, this cover off. That's because of a previous video, and I'll go ahead and throw a link above for that video, but that is one where I am diagnosing the vehicle. So if you feel a need to do that, click that little eye in the corner at any point in the video whenever you feel comfortable with doing this part of it. And we're going to go ahead and get started pulling this intake. So now you can see I am here ready to do the intake, but before I get too far involved in this, we do also have a spark plug out, by the way, but before I get too involved in this, we're going to go ahead and mention that we need to like, share, and subscribe if you find these videos helpful to you. You can do that at any point. I just want to get that out there before I get your brain thinking about what we are doing to get this thing apart. So let's get started, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our screwdriver, 8mm, nut driver, whatever. Take these clamps loose for this guy. I've already done it, so obviously I'm not going to show you that. Now this hose over here that it's usually sitting in there like that, I just take and wiggle it and pop it out there like that. Now we can take this air horn off of here relatively easily and quickly get it out of the way. Once we have that guy out of the way, we have full access to pretty much everything up here. I'm going to go ahead and start with the belt and move on to taking some wiring out. Now, obviously I'm just connecting a few things quickly. I'm going to go ahead and pull this alternator out of the way so you can see better. This could be pulled off later, now, whatever. But I'm going to go ahead and pull it off quick. It's just a 15mm bolt here, and you're going to need a pry bar in order to pry the thing out of there. They're usually wedged in there pretty darn well. So I'm going to get this thing out, and we'll move on to more wiring. Now you'll notice I never disconnected the battery while doing this alternator, and that's because I'm just going to move it out of my way so I don't have to mess with the battery at all. Making sure that, of course, I don't pull the cover off the back and short anything out. Now we're just going to take this guy, slide it aside here. Now that we have that out of the way, we have access to all kinds of wiring here. So I'm going to give you guys a top-side view to see what I'm doing. Okay, so this guy here, you don't have to disconnect this necessarily. I just usually push it off to the side, get it out of my way. We have a connector underneath here. I don't know well you can see that, but that is a main coil connector. So it does all the ignition coils over there. You can see it's like this. Now when you pull this thing out, this is usually stuck in there. You just got to slide that out. It's pretty easy. The one connector that is a little bit difficult are these injector connectors. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull one off here and then give you guys a look at it. Okay, so you can see there's a plastic piece here. This guy's usually like that. What you need to do is slide this up. Sometimes it's extremely tough to slide up. You can see I'm not able to just slide it on my own real easy. Kinda, there it goes. It's really tough to get it to past this little notch that's in it. Once you do that, this might still not come undone very easy, but this little gray connector is what you push to get it undone. Now, if it doesn't just come out, what you have to do is you have to push this gray connector down, push it into the injector harder, and then pull it back, and it'll usually unlatch when you do that. Sometimes these take a little bit of finesse, but I'm going to get all those undone, and then we'll get this nut off of here and show you how I put this wiring harness out of my way so I don't have to contend with it during the process. Don't be afraid to rotate these injectors in order to access the connectors. Okay, so I got the harness all disconnected. That was pretty easy to do. You can notice I did pull these things out from under here. If you have to, you can take these nuts or bolts, whatever, loose, and it makes it a little bit easier to go in and out. But this one, it's like it's, I don't know, looser than most of them. It came out so easy, I just, whatever, pulled it out. Now, in order to tie this thing up out of your way, you want to make sure that you get everything kind of tidied up as best you can to where you can more or less wrap it around. So, and by wrap it around, I mean the bungee cord here. So I'm going to take this guy, go ahead and make a loop around here. And that loop is temporary, because first I'm going to go ahead and hook up to one side here. And I'm going to grab this loop here and hook up to the other side, trying to keep this as tidy as possible. Pull it tight and go over to the other side of the hood. There's these little spots that hold the hood carpet type material out. Now I'm going to take and maneuver this wiring harness just to try and keep it out of my way as best as possible. Now that I have that taken care of, I can go ahead and start taking care of these other connections, like these vacuum lines. This guy here is a quick connect fitting. It's got this little white tab, and all you have to do is push it down like that, and you can pull it back. Usually it doesn't stay down, but this one does, so whatever. But there's that guy. Now, on the back here, there's also one over there, and then you have the connector here for the brake booster. Disconnect that, and it's much easier to disconnect this guy here, which you will have to wiggle a little bit and listen up. You hear that? That's because there's still vacuum in there. So pull that guy out of there. I typically just take it and find a way to just sit it on here like that. We're going to go ahead now and grab this vacuum line here and take it off. It's on the back, but I can't show you how that connector works while I'm doing it in the vehicle here. I'll have to show you that in a little bit, because there's a little tab that you have to play with to get it to come off of there. Now usually I would not pull this guy off, but I want to show you how this tab works so you can do this yourself in the back. So you can see the connector looking at this view. There's a tab right here, and this little guy here, you got to kind of go up. So this is up on the vehicle. This is normally sitting this way. I have it upside down right now. You would go up, and then you slide this guy over, and when you do that, you can see it opens up that spot in the middle. So that's what we're trying to do, is open that up so that we can disconnect it. Then you can, once that's open, you can pull the line off of the fitting on the valve cover, and you're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and put this back on where I had it. Alright, so now we need to address the fuel line in the back here, and then we'll be able to pull the intake off. Okay, so the fuel line you can see is back here. There is a metal tang on here, and you have to pull it up and then pull it towards yourself. So what we're doing is we're taking this clip here, we're popping it off of the line, and then these little notches are inside the quick connect part of it, and you slide it out. So up, out, and that thing comes apart. Then we have to find one of these guys. This is for a 5/16 fuel line. These are quick connect, disconnect fittings. What this does is it slides inside that fitting and allows it to detach. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Slide it in there. Now sometimes you might have to pull the line on further in order to get it to disconnect properly. I tend to do that anyway, just because it usually works out better for me. So I'm going to pull it forward, push that quick connect blue thing on there a little bit better, and then I'm going to pull it back. Now when I pull this back, I'm going to make sure I don't look at it. I close my eyes, look away, wear safety glasses, whatever. Sometimes these things will spray a bunch of fuel at you. See the fuel on my hands kind of coming out of the fuel rail. It's me leaving a heck of a mess down there. But we're not too worried about that, because that's not going to affect what we're doing. So before we actually go ahead and undo all the bolts and pull the intake off, I'm going to do one last step here. This is optional, I guess, but highly recommended. If you have shop air available to you, I highly recommend you take some shop air and blow in these crevices. I don't know if you can see this or not. Here we go. Oh yeah, I fixed them up. But there's a bunch of sand sitting all over the top of this intake, and a lot of it's not necessarily sand, but corrosion. So this truck was sitting for a little while in one spot because the vehicle had this failure, and so he didn't want to drive it. And while it was sitting, it ended up with this white corrosion all over the aluminum. And what I'm going to do is usually there's sand and stuff from the wheel wells flying up. I'm going to go ahead and blow around all these areas next to the intake ports before I loosen the intake. This way I can hopefully get all the debris to a spot where it's not going to fall into the intake ports and thus go into the motor. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up this as much as I can before I take the bolts loose, and then we will get the bolts loose and pull the intake off. Alright, so we're at the point now where we're going to go ahead and take those bolts loose. I'm going to give you my choice of tools here because this might be handy for a lot of you people. So I use a swivel socket. This is an 8mm swivel socket where the swivel is built into the socket. And then I use, this is, I don't know, maybe a 4-inch extension about. And then I use another swivel and another extension. This is probably a 5 or 6-inch extension. I don't know. It's roughly that. You can see how long it is according to my hand. Actually, here we go. So almost 6 inches. So we're going to go ahead and use this. This guy allows it to weasel in there, pretty much get any of these bolts out. And what I use the ratchet for is just to crack them free, and then I will resort to this guy. And this guy will zip them all the way out the rest of the way. But I don't like using that impact gun anymore. I used to try and use that all the time, but I always ended up with a couple bolts that were just too tight to crack free. So now I just go ahead and use this ratchet to crack all of them loose before I even grab that impact gun. Okay, so you'll notice I pulled some of these bolts out. Now the only reason I pulled these out is because these are in the back and it makes it tough to pull the intake out if you can't lift it up high enough in the back. So I just pull the back 4, the furthest back 4 out. That way when I tip this up, it allows it to slide out without taking out all the bolts. You also notice that I never took off the fuel rail, and that's because there's no necessary reason to. If the injectors are sealed fine, just leave well enough alone and you won't have any issues with those. So let's go ahead and pull this thing out. Assuming that I got all the bolts. Sometimes they can be wedged in there slightly. I don't recommend necessarily prying. If you do, be very cautious. There it goes. I was lifting up and then just adding a little bit of force with the pry bar. Now once you get the intake forward a little bit, you got to make sure you maneuver these wires to clear that back cover, which we won't have to worry about later because I'll show you why we want to remove that in a minute. Okay, so as you can see, we have the intake out. Now we have these guys in the way here. These, we are not going to put these back in. This is a waste of time and energy to put these back in. So we're going to go ahead and throw these out. All that does is create a mouse nest. Now, that oil pressure sensor back there, that is a common failure. So the reason I'm going to pull that plastic piece off before I dare put it back together is because I want to make sure that I can get at that oil sensor later on. It's real tough with that plastic in the way, but it's real easy with it out of the way. Okay, so you can see I got the intake on the floor, and what we want to do, we want to pull this nut off. Now, in order to get this thing apart, a lot of times you're going to have to take, there's a little red quick connect deal inside here, and I'll show you that in just a second. But what I am doing is I'm pushing in on it with, you can use a screwdriver. I just had a welding rod sitting next to me. But this little red quick connect fitting, you got to push it in order to pull this out. And then you can pull this guy out, and I will leave that out until I get this thing off. So I'll zip this 10 mil off, take this out, and then throw this thing in the trash. Because this is the thing where the oil pressure sensor is right here. So it's much easier to access with this guy out of the way. Now while you're here, check out your intake gasket. This one is completely flat right now, so I will probably have to replace this one, unfortunately, but it's not the end of the world. Another thing to consider is what's happening down at the bottom of this intake right now. See that? Huge puddle of oil. So I'm going to tip this back this way, clean up this mess, but that oil is sitting there in the intake getting burned in the engine. Every time you accelerate, it sloshes to the back cylinders, fouls the cylinders out. You want to make sure that you not only clean that out a little bit, but address your PCV issue that's in the valve cover. when you see this issue arise. So with that, hope you like this video. Like, share, subscribe, and as always, hope to see you on another video. Thanks for watching.
If you guys felt this video was worth your time and energy listening to, and you feel it saved you enough money, or any other video that I have perhaps, be sure to check out my website. If you have no other reason but to support me, you can go ahead and pick up a shirt just like this one here. And the only difference is you won't say owner on it, right by the boob there. But otherwise, pick up a shirt. It helps support me. Keeps me rolling, keeps me moving, keeps me putting these videos forward. And with that, like, share, subscribe. And as always, I hope to see you on another video. Thanks for watching.